We love to give our children resources that will light them up about their Catholic faith. And today's guest has created something truly special. Veteran homeschooling dad Philip Kosloski is here to invite you to use comic books to light up your children's faith.
Welcome to Homeschooling Saints, the podcast that helps you create the homeschool you love for the people you love. Our host is Lisa Mladinich, a Catholic life coach, TV host, best-selling author, and an instructor at Homeschool Connections.
Before we get started, remember to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, click the bell to join our channel. Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Mladinich, and today I'm talking with Philip Kosloski about how to use comic books to light up your children's faith. Philip Kosloski is a Catholic husband and homeschooling dad who spent a lot of years in Catholic ministry doing adult formation and marriage prep. He has written for Aleteia.com for the last 5 years on the topics of spirituality and prayer, but about 3 years ago he felt a tug to write something creative. On his blog, he wrote about possibly using comic books as a way to evangelize and tell a good story, to produce high-quality entertainment with a Catholic core to it. As a result, a reader at his blog reached out to introduce him to Jim Fern, a Catholic artist who'd been with Marvel and DC Comics for 30 years. Jim became a mentor to Philip and his illustrator, Michael Lavoie, resulting in the first book, Finian and the Seven Mountains, which is appropriate for children aged 8 to 13. The response to Finian and the Seven Mountains was strong, revealing the potential for a series, and Voyage Comics was born. The company now sells 8 titles, with more on the way. You can find Philip and see the whole line of books at voyagecomics.com. It's exactly how it sounds, VOYAGECOMICS.com, and that's in the show notes. Welcome to the program, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm just delighted because I've heard about you from other homeschooling families here on Long Island who love your work, and you're here on Long Island too, and you're also homeschooling. So if you wouldn't mind, just because we're kind of a homeschooling family on this show, tell us a little bit about how you got started with homeschooling.
Sure. Yeah. So when my wife and I got married, we didn't necessarily have a plan, to homeschool our children. Both my wife and I actually went through public schooling, and my wife went through private schooling. So we didn't really have any experience with homeschooling we got married. But then in the end, it just kind of came down to, we were looking what was the best for our family, the best education we can give to our children. And we just, felt, that being able to be the primary educators of our children, that would really be a great gift to them. And it would hopefully also keep us closer as a family. Also, I think both of us, we knew a lot of homeschooling families. And so, kind of their influence as well was helpful. Just knowing people who've done it already, and were just a good example for us.
Yeah, that can make all the difference in the world. So many of our kind of veteran go-to moms and dads in our homeschool network here really did discover homeschooling just by running into other homeschooling families. It was something they might not have considered at all. And so God led you on this journey, introduced you to people, and then at a certain point, you post an idea. You're just having this creative urge, and God steps in again with this introduction. What was that like? What did it feel like in terms of your conversation with God, and what was it like being introduced to Jim Fern? Tell us a little about that experience.
Yeah, it was definitely an experience where I could see that God was kind of leading me in a certain direction, that He was kind of confirming my thoughts and desires. And, and it wasn't even just Jim as well. Like, there was also a reader to my blog who, when I posted this idea of, should I get into Catholic comics? What do you think about it? There's another reader who contacted me. He wasn't involved with comics, but he was an animator actually for Disney, and again, just a faithful Catholic, and he kind of also just kind of lended his support and encouragement, and especially when I was able to kind of meet Jim and kind of show him my ideas. It was great to then kind of learn the craft of making comic books. Because at the time, I really hadn't gotten into creative writing or fictional writing, and for some reason I was just drawn to writing comic book scripts, and I did all that I could to kind of self teach myself how to write these scripts. But then when it gets to that stage of translating it into a comic book, then Jim just really, he was very honest, which I think was very helpful. Like I didn't want him to say, "Oh yeah, this is all very good," and then it turns out to be just a horrible comic book. And so it was helpful to get his honest feedback so that I could, make something good that not only was inspired by my faith, but it also was actually good quality, just good quality storytelling. And it really takes someone who's kind of already inside that world to be able to tell you, that this would work. And yeah, I mean, that first comic book we made was a great learning experience. And then after that, yeah, just continually perfecting that craft, and then trying to surround myself with other individuals, other experts in that field, so that, as with in all writing, you can write, but you don't really know if it's any good until someone else reads it. And, really constructive feedback is really a great blessing in that regard. Because then you can grow in your skill. And that's definitely was the case with Jim and those first few years, just kind of growing in that skill, but then using it to glorify God.
Wow, that is such a fascinating story and makes so many good points about taking feedback, about being willing to learn from others and have other lights that are sort of guiding you on that path in the process of your saying yes to God. I love that. What interesting readers you have of your blog, by the way. Wow, animators and people connected with, Jim Fern and all that. That's really neat that you were able to surround yourself with those people. It sounds like some of them were literally sent to you. I also want to just pull out one last thing, which is that as a homeschooling father, to be that witness to your children of starting with an inspiration, starting with a prayer, and then kind of noticing and responding and putting the pieces together and self-teaching, all of that. That's so homeschooling ethos right there. A conversation with God and that being led by the heart in many ways to keep learning and growing and saying yes to God. So just on so many levels, that's a great story.
Yeah, definitely. Something I've learned over the years, and what we hope to teach our kids as well, is just that everybody is unique and has their own gifts and talents. And, that's one of the reasons why we hope to use homeschooling to help foster those specific talents and interests, and to be able to point each child in a different direction, knowing that not everybody's going to do the exact same thing. And so we just kind of figure out over the years, what it is that most interests them, and to kind of point them in that direction.
Yeah, fantastic. It really does attune us to our children if we are on that journey too. It's so wonderful. Tell us a little bit about what that was like collaborating for the first time on that first story.
Yeah, so, kind of what I had been saying, it's, so initially I kind of had my own idea, and initially that idea was actually just a single kind of comic book. And, the story was, I'll be honest, it was okay. And it probably would have been fine if it stayed stayed as it was, but it wouldn't have really reached a wide audience, and it would have just ended right there, I think. And so what was kind of interesting is, at first Jim kind of tested the waters to see like how I would handle kind of different types of criticism, and then kind of halfway through, then he just spoke a little more honestly and just said, the way it's going right now, it's not going to be that great, but if you go in a different direction, then I think there's a lot of potential. And so that's kind of what we did is then about halfway through the production of that first comic book, then we started to kind of rework things and to see the larger picture in mind, that it could be a series, and just it really kind of changed the way we were telling the story, and it turned out much better than we had imagined.
That's so wonderful. Just as a writer and an author myself, I don't know why. Maybe because I came from a military family. It was all about collaboration and teamwork. When I first started writing, and editors would give me those painful responses about this needs to change, or they would just change it without saying anything, I was able to, by God's grace, notice how they were improving my work. Even though I couldn't get into their heads and I couldn't do what they did in the beginning for myself, sometimes that God gives you the grace in the moment, if you're truly on the path that He's calling you to take that painful feedback and have it shift your view, and you start to notice in retrospect, wow, the way I come at this has really evolved. These people have been kind of allowed in to shape how I create. And it then becomes, these helpers along the way helping you step into God's bigger vision for your life, which, as you just described, was a smaller vision when you started out.
Yeah, and one benefit too about the comic book process is it's definitely it's a team. It's always very much a team effort, because so as the writer, I write the script, but then what happens after that is then the artist will take those instructions, kind of what I originally envisioned for each of the pages, and then he will kind of interpret it in his way. And what's interesting is the artist may take it in a different direction that I didn't think of at the time, but often it's very beneficial that in a certain sense, I have an image in my mind of what it would look like, but then the artist kind of looks at that and says, well, actually that won't work. It has to go like this. And so then that kind of give and take of the comic book process, it's if you have a good team, it really works well, because it's it's definitely a team effort, and you need everybody involved.
That's so cool. So as you're putting them together, as you have your team conversations, or as you're writing and mapping things out, what are the kinds of things that you incorporate into your comic books that are not typical of comic books?
Sure. So kind of our goal with our comics is to create entertaining stories that have kind of underlying Catholic values. So sometimes they're more explicit. We might do, a series of comics on, say like Saint Joan of Arc, for example, or on different or other saints, and so it's more. So those comics are more, of a biography. They're kind of more explicit. Catholicism is there in every page, but then some of our other comic books, like Finian, for example, or the Phantom Phoenix is another series that we started this year. We want it to be kind of integrated into it, but not kind of being the main focus. And so it's we try to create an exciting narrative that not only Catholics would enjoy, but really, Christians or really anyone, just because it's a good story. And then what we then also try to do is, through these comics, one thing I like to kind of bring out is just how there is this kind of invisible world that we don't often see, but that it's there, and so we try to kind of portray that visually, and specifically, I guess, with thinking about like spiritual warfare and kind of the reality of angels and demons, and so what we do, I guess, especially with the Finian series, is we kind of look at kind of some of these kind of medieval legends and try to visualize them on the page, and so so with like different things like gargoyles or other kind of these medieval monsters that were out there, but then showing how they kind of represent evil, and this really at the core of it, that there's this kind of spiritual battle that's out there, and so kind of what our hope then is to kind of just kind of to show children or even adults as well, just kind of open their eyes a little bit, and to see, I guess, to see that there's more to this world than what we see, and to just realize that they too are a part of a battle, and kind of the need to be vigilant in that everyday battle.
I love that you bring up kind of this sense of medieval creatures and legends, and this sense of there being an invisible world around us, and how that's been expressed in different ways. You incorporate some historical perspective into the books themselves. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, in particular, say with like the Finian series, we kind of took this, again, this kind of legend of these. It's called the Sword of Saint Michael, and it revolves around these kind of 7 monasteries that are all dedicated to Saint Michael, the archangel, and they all kind of share similar characteristics. They're all founded, for the most part, from like a vision of Saint Michael, or somehow influenced by him, or there might have been a vision at some point at these locations. So what I do with these, with each issue, is we go to this location, and I do a lot of research to show the artist kind of what it would have looked like at the time, and then we also kind of research the local culture, kind of incorporate those different things, and then also kind of, again, researching the different medieval legends that are surrounding this area, and so we, in a certain sense, we try to be both historically accurate in terms of our depiction of these areas, but then also to visually represent these legends in a visual way, and then so what I do then too is, at the end of each issue, there's usually like an essay that's on this, that talks about the history of this location, its significance, and just to kind of to make that connection from the location as it is in our comic book, but then also making the connection to that and the actual historical location that really does exist. So just trying to bridge that gap between history and fantasy.
Yeah, that's lovely, because that's like our bread and butter, isn't it, as homeschoolers, is connecting things out to the real world, while really stoking that imaginative faculty in our children as such a pathway, a spiritual pathway to encountering God and hearing his voice. I understand you also weave in some explicit church history. Obviously, if some of these places are places where St. Michael appeared, or someone had a vision of St. Michael, we're getting some of our own Catholic Church history.
Yeah, certainly. So, these, it is just kind of interesting to kind of, as I get through each of these locations, to kind of research them and to kind of figure out what it is that the how St. Michael appeared in these locations, kind of who they influenced at the time, and then how that then laid a foundation for later it being kind of a destination for pilgrimage. So like I said, I try as much as possible to kind of base these stories on these actual medieval legends. I mean, sometimes as with any creative effort, you kind of have to fill in the gaps kind of with your own interpretation of it. But, a lot of the time, kind of the historical record is really quite fascinating. So I try to, leave it as much as I can.
Yeah, that's really neat because you do the legwork for us parents. I can think of so many different ways to use these to ignite enthusiasm and connect our children into the work we're doing in their education. I mean, so many kids will create their own stories and illustrate them and things like that. So you could see them imitating them. You could see us stepping into art lessons. But I remember reading a very long time ago that anything that children read helped their literacy and encouraged them to be lifelong learners. And so if kids are picking up, comic books, that connects them just even to their desire to read because these are colorful, engaging, exciting images. What's your sense of how the homeschooling families that you've connected with as a result of creating these resources, how are people using them?
Sure. Yeah. Kind of like you said, comic books are kind of a great kind of entryway for many kids, especially if they have a hard time opening up, kind of a basic book that has no pictures and it's just text on the page. For some kids, that's kind of daunting, and so finding a good comic book for them can be kind of a first step. And so I know that, I've heard from different families that they, that some of their children who have a hard time reading will use these comic books and really enjoy them. Other, families, like I said, I know of one family who, they had a unit on Ireland, and so they were reading the first Finian book, which is based in Ireland, as kind of, just kind of excite their curiosity about Ireland and its history. And so, it's been, I've heard also too, that it's been beneficial just because sometimes it's not always easy to find good, wholesome comic books or graphic novels. Because it kind of, the one thing that I've definitely realized recently is that you can't always trust a comic book or a graphic novel that you get from, say, like Barnes and Noble or something like that. A parent might think, well, it's a comic book. It'll be fine. But then, sometimes later the kid will show a page to the parent, and the parent will be kind of shocked at what they find, because they didn't realize that comic book wasn't actually made for children, that it was made for adults. And there's no real delineation in bookstores or comic book stores. At one time it wasn't the case. Comic books were, family friendly, and there wasn't really an issue, but especially nowadays, it's a much bigger minefield. And so, a lot of families have just expressed how it's kind of refreshing to be able to buy a comic book and just know that the content is good and wholesome, and it won't, it won't do any harm.
Yeah, so good to know. Just to have a safe place for your kids to really have an exciting adventure of the imagination while learning. Have parents told you anything about the responses their kids give, or what they've seen in terms of growth or expanded curiosity, or anything that's been ignited in their homeschools through the use of these resources?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard from a few different families. I mean, that like that it has, kind of helped in some ways with their, creativity or their imagination. I have knowledge of at least one like Finian birthday party where everybody kind of dressed up as some of the characters from the books, and then also with the Phantom Phoenix series. I think I've heard of at least one or two families where the kids kind of made a makeshift costume based on the main character, and so they're kind of using their creativity to make their own costumes out of what they were reading. So I thought that was kind of neat.
That's wonderful. It really is, to just see the kids having so much fun with it. And they're getting good ideas and interesting facts along the way too, but it's not dry. It's got that fantastical kind of comic book flair to it. What other stories are in the pipeline? Tell us about what you've got already and what's coming.
Sure. So the main series that we've been working on for the past few years is the Finian series, and we've been able to produce 5 issues so far, and our hope is to finish that kind of basic series, which will be 7 issues. We hope to finish that next year, and then kind of in another way, we started this past year a series called the Phantom Phoenix, and it's kind of our take on the superhero genre. And so we really have, so this next year we hope to continue the series as well as to expand on it. We see just a lot of potential. There's, especially with these kind of Marvel and DC movies that are very popular in the last, really the last 10 years, that there's a big interest in kind of superheroes, but unfortunately, there's just not a lot of content out there that's really, upholding Catholic values. And so we're really working to hopefully have kind of, a good array of good superheroes that are not just, I guess you could say, placeholders, just because they're Christian, that they're good, but that they actually have interesting backstories and just a good story behind them that make them entertaining for the kids to read. But then also have, these superheroes are motivated by their Catholic faith, and that kind of comes out in the stories.
That's so exciting, because I've often posited that this resurgence of superheroes into our culture is a craving for the Savior, for a figure that comes and saves. And so it's unconsciously our souls just trying to fill that space. And so to bring it out, to touch into that chord, that longing, not only for a hero, but to be a hero, to be other Christs. I feel like the superheroes genre is just, such a beautiful and fruitful place to explore in that regard. You've also done some saint biographies, correct? Which saints have you done so far?
Yeah, so we'll definitely continue working on the different, exploring different saints' lives. We've, kind of the most well-known saint we've done is Saint Joan of Arc, but we've also been kind of exploring some kind of the lesser-known kind of saints in the United States. One of them, his name is Father Patrick Peyton. He coined the phrase, "The family that prays together stays together." And so we did a comic book about his life. And then recently we partnered with my local diocese, La Crosse, Wisconsin, to do a comic book on another priest whose cause for canonization is in the process. His name is Father Joe Walieski, and so we just released a comic book on his life, and so in the future we'll probably do a mix of both well-known saints and also those kind of lesser-known saints to kind of help their causes to kind of help people know more about them and about their lives.
Wow, that's just fantastic. What a mission. It's exciting to listen to. So as we're wrapping up, Phil, thank you so much. I know you're a very busy, hardworking homeschooling dad. Thank you for taking the time, but just leave us with any final thoughts about any of this. What would you like to say to our parents listening?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one area that has really kind of come under attack lately has been the entertainment industry. And, it's something that is just getting increasingly more difficult to take your kids to the movies or to give them good, wholesome books. And so, what we're trying to do at Voyage is kind of to give a healthy alternative that is not only kind of Catholic in name, but that is actually enjoyable for you and for your children. And yeah, I feel like that's just an area that is one way where we can kind of positively affect the culture, and to kind of to show where our priorities are, and to really kind of try to cultivate the imagination of our children in the right direction.
Amen and amen. I feel like every time we reclaim something, take the banner of Christ and plant it in a place that the culture may have run away with, may have corrupted or co-opted for some other agenda, that we can reclaim it. We can stand and call out the good again. And I feel like even that dynamic by itself, reclaiming some aspect of culture that has potential to be good, and to show that to our children, to show us that, look, maybe there's some bad entertainment out there, but we can create really beautiful, or we can support and enjoy really beautiful and good entertainment that it has value as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that it's, it often, it's very easy to kind of, condemn the culture or to, to say how bad things are, but really the task up to us is to create, to be creators and to kind of fill the world with goodness and light.
Amen and amen. Thank you so much, Phil. Everybody, check out voyagecomics.com. Just great reading for the chilly weather times or rainy days, or even out under a tree on a beautiful summer afternoon. Just so inspiring. I'm sure it will have your kids making up stories of their own, playing, maybe creating costumes, as Phil said, or even having parties. I'm hoping that, Phil, eventually that you're going to do board games and trading cards too. I think that would be really fun. You're so creative. We just want you to keep building this empire. Everybody check out voyagecomics.com and you'll find Philip Kosloski there. Thank you so much for being with us, and stay tuned for our short feature coming right up.
Hi, I'm author AJ Cattapan. Welcome to Books and Blessings, a place where, for the last 3 years, I have shared with you books for Catholic teens and tweens. Since today will be my final Books and Blessings segment for the Homeschooling Saints podcast, I asked host Lisa Mladinich if I might share with you my own novel for Catholic tweens. Perhaps you've heard me mention it briefly in the past. Seven Riddles to Nowhere is a middle grade mystery that is near and dear to my heart. You see, many years ago, I taught at a Catholic school that closed. It was a very tiny school with only about 100 students in its final year. With only about 20 students total in grades 5 through 8, we felt very much like a family. And the grief from that school closing sat with me for years. Finally, I decided to write my feelings out, and the result is a novel that has been read by Catholic schools and homeschooling students throughout the U.S. and Australia. In Seven Riddles to Nowhere, we meet 7th grader Cameron Boyd. Because of a tragic event that took place when he was only 5 years old, Cam suffers from selective mutism. He is unable to speak to adults when he steps outside his home. Cam's mom hopes his new school will cure his talking issues, but just as he starts to feel comfortable at St. Jude Catholic School, financial problems threaten the school's existence. Then a letter arrives with the opportunity to change everything. Cam learns that he and several others have been selected as potential heirs to a fortune. He just has to solve a series of riddles to find the treasure before the other students. If he succeeds, he'll become heir to a fortune that could save his school. The riddles send Cam and his friends on a scavenger hunt through the churches of Chicago, but solving them won't be easy. With the school's bully as one of the other potential heirs, Cam and his friends must decipher the hidden meanings in artwork and avoid the mysterious men following them in a quest to not only keep the school open, but keep Cam's hopes for recovering his voice alive. Seven Riddles to Nowhere has won a Catholic Press Association Book Award and received the Catholic Writers Guild seal of approval. It is recommended for readers aged 9 through 13 who enjoy riddles and mysteries. The churches in the book are actual churches in Chicago, and readers have been known to travel to the city to visit the churches and see the artwork for themselves. As I mentioned earlier, this is my final Books and Blessings segment. I've enjoyed sharing great books with all of you over the last 3 years. However, the Lord has been calling me to lead an increasing number of retreats and to speak at more and more Catholic conferences. I ask for your prayers as I try my best to follow God's call. In the meantime, please check out my YouTube channel where I interview Catholic authors about their books. Follow me on Instagram and visit my website, ajcattapan.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter to see where God is calling me next. May God bless you, and as always, I wish you happy reading.
And that's our show for today. Our program is sponsored by homeschoolconnections.com. Be sure to subscribe to Homeschooling Saints and leave us an honest review. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.